then later in organizing. Now the other comment I would make is that initially this is not going to be especially a good organizing tool because it's going to have limited appeal for many groups. But the reason we push this, again, is because this is the year of the Clean Water Act. And if we can get the special recognition of the river, and if we can get Congress to agree to these tons of points, we now do have a really strong tool, I think, to go out into many communities that are faced with toxic pollution and other problems and say, look, this is something that we've worked on, this is something we're still working on, and this does address at least some of the needs of your group. So it can be used later, I think, as an organization.
Didn't we talk about a day when we could all just one day?
We were thinking about a common date.
Right.
We didn't come, but we realize if we're going to have an effect on the Clean Water Act, we really got to get off and running. We can't drag our feet.
Questions? Questions, things you don't understand.
Does the map that you're talking about, Florence, does that contemplate not only identifying pollution-related problems on the river, but also groups that are working or actively?
I would envision, for example, in your summary sheet, perhaps, or I would envision a couple of pages at least for each state, and on each state's pages, you might have, for example, X number of groups are exist in this state concerned with these kinds of problems.
There are a lot of ways we can attack the problem. What our task is we need to identify the problem we're going to agree to attack. And particularly, to go to the foundation and say, we've all looked at each other and said, clean water unites us. And we realize in the next 2 years, that the Clean Water Act is a real evident opportunity. It's not the only thing we're going to do. It's not the only thing of importance, but it is kind of one of these overriding opportunities that comes along every once every decade or so. And we're going to, one of the things we're going to specifically attack is going to be the Clean Water Act. How has it worked for the Mississippi? How has it not worked? How can it be improved? What are some of the particular toxic problems? It's a wonderful piece that Florence has put together. Ann Robinson is working on this with Diane Cameron and Rob Marks at NRDC, and she asked me to just beg all of you to take a look at the outline and give her calls with feedback. This is not fait accompli. She's really wants impact from everybody in the line. So I'm going to send her Florence's piece as soon as I get back on Monday. I think that's just the kind of thing she needs.
All right, the other kind of thing that Bob was, that Bob was emphasizing, the way of collecting data is the mile markers. For example, you would say where your group is located. And if we were able to get this in a computer database, then you can say, like, between mile marker X and Y, this number of groups exist. Or between mile marker X and Y, there are this number of facilities that are discharging pollutants in the river, this number of pounds, and you can even give it a breakdown.
So you could come in,
You can
there
get
could
very
be 15
sophisticated.
groups in mile marker 25 that would send data in, but they would all be getting data, and so they'd sign on as mile marker 25, and then we could pull mile marker 25 to 35 would be a certain stretch of the river, and we could pull out all the people that are interested. Anybody could put stuff on the database, but they would come in as mile marker 25. So if you got a river, the Minnesota River, that would not be, that where it entered the river would be the mile marker. So it would be identified by its relationship with the Mississippi. Then you'd say the Minnesota River, and you'd give the information up, or some small creek that came in, but it would all, we have mile markers. The Mississippi's held together by mile markers, and that would be one way to just get everybody getting their data online without having approval.
I would make one other comment about this toxic fact sheet. If you notice the tri-chemicals released in the greatest quantity, the top 5 are Louisiana's top 5. I mean, Louisiana dumped so much stuff into the environment. That's not in the water either. That's in the total environment.
Right.
Until it just sort of distorts the total picture.
Yep.
And look at how much toxics Louisiana dumped into the river. I mean, that's I should say in the watershed. That is unreal. This kind of data could be embarrassing. And maybe states will look at it and voluntarily say, boy, we got to do something. Look, we are way out of line.
That was fast.
How can you embarrass Louisiana?
Anyway, that's about
Smell red
Okay.
beans and rice.
Let's do are there any other questions, things that you don't understand? Let's do for this subcommittee then what we did for the last one. What do you like about their proposal? Just again, real quick bullets, sentences, and let the committee take notes, soak it up, and take it back, and then we'll turn it around.
Yeah, I like the mile marker control, particularly because that's what's used by the navigational system already, so it makes us with that.
I like the special clean water special designation idea.
Yeah, so
Well, I think they really, there's been a lot of ideas out there that we've all kind of funneled around, and they've picked out some very specific things that are doable, and I think that's wonderful, that we really narrowed some things down that we really can begin to take action on and focus on.
okay.
No, what Bill said is what I.
Okay. Other things that you like about their proposal?
I like the way Florence pulled all of our ideas together.
Yes.
That was
We had a great committee. I was writing like crazy. I just sat there and wrote and listened.
It's a good skill to have.
And
Other things?
Robin Marks with the NRDC, she couldn't make it today, but they are a member of the interest steering committee also.
She's very interested. She just had planned to come, but
Something
something came up.
came up.
I got some stuff from them on the Delaware River too.
Mm-hmm.
The Texaco company.
Concerns? Things that you want the committee to think about in their next session? What do they think? Dwayne and Bill and Jim?
I'd offer 3 friendly amendments for whatever they're worth. The emphasis on the Clean Water Act, I think, is appropriate, but I'd much prefer to see it emphasize building a coalition to achieve a special designation, recognizing that we may not get what we want in the Clean Water Act, and that if we can't get what we want, it may be better to wait and try again the following year with separate legislation or attached to something else. Secondly, I'd like to see the second item expanded a little bit in scope so that it's more of a citizens information network.
You mean this?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that the emphasis on MAP I don't think is nearly enough. I think we really need to get a whole lot of citizen involvement if we want to accomplish the first objective, the first issue. And I can envision doing things like town meetings and a database of activists as opposed to environmental data, peer exchange where we get people who are familiar with a particular issue, cover their costs to get to another community that has an identical kind of problem or an identical kind of organizational problem. And then the third one relates to the education and publicity objectives. They strike me as being something that's more of the communications committee line, and I'd like to propose a substitute project, which would be to publish case studies of environmental racism and classism along the Mississippi River. And the reason I suggest that is I think we need to distinguish ourselves from other groups, and that this is one area where I think we're in a lead. I think we're fairly unique. We bring something that's very much needed, and I think that it deserves some focus. I know one of your criteria is bringing people together and to have inclusive issues, but I think the starting point on environmental racism is to document it, publicize it so that people can understand it.
Your article that's going to be printed in a lot of Sierra Club publications on environmental racism. It's a very good article. My only comment is that I like to see us do videotapes. Florence's article.
We have copies of it, and I'll put it in, it's in our newsletter, it's on the front page of the newsletter, and we'll put it out back. And
I'd much like to see that because we've been looking for a good article for our national magazine.
This is an exceptional, this is very
We
good.
need an abstract service, we can get this
Is that-
stuff around.
How did you view that videotape that you were in? I mean, I just saw part of it.
Videotape.
Could
How did I
we,
do it? They had professional people and I just.
No, how did you view it? I mean, how did you,
What was your reaction?
what was your
What did you think
reaction
about
to
it?
that as far as
Yeah, how
being
did
a
you
tool to hand out to people?
this is a great discussion, but I really want,
Oh, okay.
again, I want to keep us focused if I can. This is my job.
Thanks, say about that.
Y'all can talk about this in break. It sounds, or over lunch or whatever, and I'll probably join you. It sounds like a great conversation. Other concerns that people have that you want the committee to think about when they go back?
Dwayne, your concerns were kind of long. Would you give them to me in one?
I got
You
them.
You got everything.
Okay, great.
I thought it was,
I wanted to add one thing on that, up no, on your number 1A, the recognition of the river as a special, it should be something of a tourist attraction, because a lot of people come to the United States from other countries, and it's one of the most, they wanna see
Right.
that river. I mean,
Right.
there's so much stuff like Mark Twain and books and stuff that are written about that river, that they wanna see that river somewhere in there, yep,
All right.
tourism. And I think if you push that part of it, you know, it causes a lot of people to say, hey, what's going on with that river? Look at how bad it is. Comment from
I had Jim and then Willie.
Two things. One, on term native biological diversity, I've had a lot of experience fighting for that, and that's subverted a lot of times. I suggest adding on the adjective natural native biological diversity. And
Native doesn't mean natural, I thought native meant indigenous to the
well,
area.
see, they take and do things like say, well, we want to clear cut to increase deer. That decreases biological
You're
diversity.
right. Natural, native, biological diversity.
Every
We'll
second,
add a couple more adjectives next year when they
Yeah.
change it again.
and the second thing is on 1A navigation. I personally don't think that should be on there. That's the only reason why it's important is because of all the government subsidies and, let them bring it up. I don't think we should.
Okay, something for the committee to think about and talk about when they get back. I had Willie. Bill, you wanted to get in as well?
I just think an important thing is, continually look for common factors along the river that we can find from state to state, such as the issue of environmental racism and tourism, and how we can develop programs around them to reflect the issue of water in the river and basin. So I don't know what those ought to be exactly, but I think it's looking for what are those common things that we can use to develop programs around. Not just stick with this list. We need to have some open honesty and say, hey, we're still looking for things that might provide a real exciting vehicle for us to move on.
Do you mean relative to this, or as an ongoing project or new project?
Looking for that new project, for that new issue that we can really do something with.
In other words, that would be 5 new projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to get bogged down in something, there's something really great out there that you can do something with. For instance, there are a lot of little small communities along the river that have no resources. They've become very, very isolated social, economically, and environmentally. And what can we do to help focus on their problems, like Myersville, Mississippi?
Curdy Sheen, Wisconsin is an
Yeah.
issue I'm working on, right?
And those are the, sort of the forgotten,
Mm-hmm.
thrown by the wayside places. And what can we do
Exactly.
to help them?
Dying little river towns.
Okay, other concerns? Great. We're at 10:30, and I'm gonna make an adjustment in wherever the agenda is. What my sense is we're having good conversation, it just takes more time than I had budgeted to get through everything. So I think if we took a break now, folks can stretch, go to the bathroom, we'll get the chairs and tables set up in a different configuration. I can find the tape, if anybody knows where the tape is. I seem to have set it down somewhere. And we'll reconvene here in 15 minutes, so 11:15, and we'll hear the next subcommittee's report.
Willie, do you need some help with
Let's
that?
get going.
That's right, just wait till the day moves on, huh,
Just
Diane?
one reminder, if people have names and addresses for me to list in the minutes of their newsletters, I'd like you to fill up.
That was the news. There should be 3 pages.
Yeah, there's one more.
We were upset about the screen, though. Do you think it's bad? This is not the right grade. It's okay.
This looks great.
It's this one.
But we're allowed to have a layout, but they put the wrong grade. About how it's
Diane,
I got video and an urban forum piece about putting together on a
use.
I think if this would go, man, what I'm saying is training.
I won't need this.
It's very important that this is information, they got information to know that they want for. That's overrunning onto the lady here.
Okay? I think we're ready to hear next from the Communications Networking Committee.
Willie.
Sure.
That's you, isn't
You have in the packet, or should have, a copy of the thing that was sent out to everybody. Does everybody have that?
Yeah, and I forgot to put Willie's name on it.
That's all right. But, just trying to come up with some ideas of, there was some excitement over here about we need to get these things out, and, we certainly agree. I guess a primary immediate need is to make sure that we have a directory or a database of the individuals and groups that are active in the Alliance right now, so that everybody has that. That directory needs to have something in it, a little information about who the different groups are, what their issues are, what they're working on, where they're located, and everybody expressed an interest in having a newsletter for the Basin Alliance, and that would come out, say, quarterly, and then in between those times, or if there's some special issue, to have a fact sheet or an alert sheet or whatever that would tell us about things that are happening, like, say, the Prairie Island case. And that in that directory, or it might be a separate directory, bless you, it would be who has good contacts with the media, what are those media, which organizations have newsletters or other communication ability, who has computers, who has faxes, those sorts of things. And let's see, where are we here?
You're right there. Your directory was the first thing under needs.
Yeah.
Next thing is a comprehensive list of all groups, newsletter, then workshops.
Yeah, and then also a directory of the issues or specific problems or whatever, that so that people can sort of see what's happening, or what needs to be happening, or what we might be focusing on in the river. And then in order to improve our skills, because we all tend to focus locally or on issues that most directly affect us, how can we improve our communication or publication skills? Either, and it's not just the individuals around this table, but folks up and down the basin, how to put on workshops for people to learn more about how to put on press conferences, how to work with the media, how to use the media in an effective way, how to become someone that the media looks to the individual groups in the Alliance for news and for stories that it would help them improve their circulation. Workshops on how to develop better skills using technology such as computers. There are a lot of different things out there, and I'm just becoming somewhat computer literate, but there's more that I don't know about it than I do, and so it's who has maybe some things like I have a computer but don't really know how to use it, and how can I hook into networks? What networks are out there where you can get information, where you can transfer information rapidly from one place to another? What else is on there?
It says mail services, but that was just
Yeah,
faxes.
and then different mail services, but most of that's discussed in that memo anyway. Let's see.
Existing networks, Willie, and existing networks.
It's the new stuff we discussed, Jeff.
Yeah, this stuff we discussed yesterday, is looking sort of at there are some existing networks other than maybe the groups sitting around here. Are there people in here that are in groups, like say state and federal agencies that have their own communication networks, the river pilots? You know, I would think we look how to make information relevant to groups that are not part of the alliance. Like for the River Pilots Association, do you really want to run a tugboat up a radioactive river? You know, they started this discussion like that, and it spills over across the levees or whatever. And there, you know, there's a Cattlemen's Association, Farm Bureau Federations, and all of those things. And it's thinking of how we can get information to those groups about problems in the basin or things that are happening in the basin that they might want to join in on a piece of it, or at least interested. How to make allies out of non-traditional groups, and how to look for things that are going on that we might take advantage of. For instance, right now, a group that has not really been involved that much in environmental issues is the NAACP, but Ben Chavis is the new head of the NAACP and environmental racism, and getting the NAACP involved in environmental issues is at the top of his agenda. So he's setting a new thing, and it would be maybe considering involving Ben Chavis in some functions along the river. Let's see.
Establish new networks, the politicians, governors, congressmen, the media,
looking at ways to, and again, these are some existing networks, like the governors talk to each other, or they don't. In Louisiana and Mississippi, they insult each other, but well, that's what we do.
Well, my girlfriend's prettier than yours, right?
Exactly.
But if I was going to take the Prairie Island as an example, probably the best allies that you haven't tapped into are people in Louisiana, because New Orleans gets its drinking water from the river. And I would think the idea of how do we make the information that we have usable to the people in another part of the basin. I would write a press release, not for release in Minnesota, but for release in New Orleans, that says, this is what's being proposed on an island in the Mississippi River. I don't think anybody in Louisiana could perceive that someone would want to put a high-level radioactive waste disposal site in their drinking water. Except Jim Bob Moffitt does it right now. Freeport McMoran, which is the largest discharge of toxics in the surface waters in the United States, 92% of the toxics that go into the Mississippi River in Louisiana come from phosphate fertilizer companies and as radioactive waste. So maybe it's not that far-fetched. Maybe we already have a radioactive waste disposal site.
Computers. Need them, training.
Anyway, looking for, you want to come up and give this?
I'm just helping.
I just can't read it, I'm sorry. It takes a little while. But there are a lot of things that we need help with in terms of things like computers, because it's a tool, but if we don't understand how to get the most out of it, there might be some little additional piece of equipment that you could get, or some network that you could hook into that would save you a lot of time, that would open up a lot of avenues for getting information out, getting information in, and what forms those could be in. And the same thing with videos. Patrick and Mary Lee went to a video conference recently, and Patrick came back and said, I went there to learn, and I found out that we know more about how to do this than anybody that's at the conference. It's kind of like my brother-in-law, who many years ago joined the paratroopers to learn more about skydiving, and found out he had 422 more jumps than his instructor. Anyway, so sometimes we don't realize that we have information and skills that we could share with other people. We assume that people are at our speed, and I'll guarantee you there are people sitting around this room that have skills that I desperately could use, or information, but you just don't know that I'm stupid in that area. So it's how can we learn more about the individual skills and abilities and resources of the groups. That's sort of what that directory is. But that's also why we would push having workshops where we would get people not just locally but basin-wide involved in training and workshops and things, and bring in people who have maybe zero skills in a computer, and if it's something that they're going to be able to use, and bring them up to some sort of speed. What else have we got here?
That American Forum.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with that. You
The
wanna
American Forum is a group.
stand up?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's a group where they come together.
Come over here, Pat. This is Patrick. He's hiding behind the camera. Hi.
We work with the American Forum in Louisiana, where they're trying to bring together more media outlets to specific issues in social justice areas. And what they do is they get together basically maybe once every 2 months, put together a bunch of article ideas, maybe get somebody to write the article, find somebody to, sponsor the article, and then we send it to DC, and they send it out to basically all the press in the state of Louisiana as a really nice package. And it works pretty well, especially with the small media, radio stations, and small newspapers. So maybe we can approach them and ask them to, create an American Forum along the Mississippi River, to where they get together with a small committee of who is on the river, come up with ideas what needs to be brought together from the top to bottom, put out an article a month, and then basically distribute it through a wide press release from one end to the other. So that's the American Forum angle.
There are
I don't know if
a number
anyone
of
else
other
is
things
familiar
that-
with it.
I'm certainly not aware of all of them, but for those of you who may be familiar with Bureau of National Affairs, BNA, they put out a whole series of books on the laws and environmental laws and regulations at the federal and state level, and they've got them all in a book. But every month they put out a sort of an update of what's happening in Congress, and something like the Prairie Island suit is something that they would put on the front page, because they've already had 1 or 2 articles on it in previous issues several years ago, but they may not be aware of that lawsuit. So it's finding people like BNA, because everybody in industry gets BNA, all these governmental agencies get BNA, and it's something where folks become very aware of what's going on through. You don't even think of something like BNA as a media tool for getting information out, but it's a real nice one. So that's. No, okay. So that's basically what we came up with last night. In addition, was looking primarily at existing networks that are already out there, or existing, like the American Forum. How could we get them to expand to include the basin and what's going on?
Okay. Questions?
One thing I found useful with other groups is just to abstract what you're doing. A couple sentences about an issue, name and address for more information. Quick, it's easy, you can get it out to the network real easy. And then if it's an appropriate area, for what you're working on, and do it often.
Something I want to do, I've talked to a few people here, contributing editors for the Mississippi Times. There are different points of view. Most of us here, we have newsletters. I think it would be very useful if we swap contributing articles under contributing editorship. Some of folks here have written, like Paul and Bill and Florence for the Mississippi Times. I would encourage, although we will, as Alliance, have our own newsletter, I think that if we would cross, particularly going into the basin, which I'm in contact with some of the people, and that's the way that we establish ourselves with newsletters and articles. So I welcome contributing editorials.
Along, just to follow up on
Susan, too.
Bill's thing, the MICRA, that's whatever we decided it stood for, the Interstate Compact effort, whatever it is. They, even though they are a government entity, they use a lot of stuff that they have stolen very, very
Skillfully,
openly
yeah.
from American Rivers Newsletter. Send them your stuff. In other words, if you want the feds to hear what your group is doing or some of the issues in your area, send your newsletter to MICRA. So it isn't just to our newsletter, to each other's newsletters, but be thinking about other entities' newsletters.
Yeah, these are the, again, looking for these existing or developing networks that we can get our information to. And it's something where you want the individual organizations to be aware of and sending their information to, but also as a release or information from the alliance, so that we're hooking into these things maybe a couple of different directions.
Okay. Let's move then, if you don't have questions, because what I've been hearing have been, new ideas. What do you like about what the committee's proposed? And then we'll turn it over and suggestions you want to give the committee for them to deliberate on. What do you like about what they've proposed so far? Just again, real quick bullets. Yeah, Florence.
I like the idea of computers.
Okay, that's a bullet.
I like the idea of the directory.
Okay. Committee members are taking notes. I don't know who else is. Okay, Patrick. Yeah.
I like the idea of the thoroughness with which they've looked at a lot of different aspects of the needs.
Others, what do you like?
I think from the way that what they've got put up there is going to be an awful resource place to be able to tap into when you need to call someone and find out who can help you on different things. Because sometimes our problems are the same, they're just in different locations.
Okay. Other things that you like?
It fits into what we did in our projects and programs.
Okay. Okay, let's flip it over then. Things that you want the committee to think about, concerns that you might have about what they've proposed, other new ideas that you think they should think about. Yeah.
One thing would be just to caution against reinventing the wheel, to really take advantage of existing networks that are out there and or databases or sources of assistance. And there are a lot that are out there that we just need to take advantage of.
Okay.
Well, that's basically what this is saying. We need to take advantage of existing networks, and we need to have a working knowledge of how to use those databases or
Okay.
programs.
Bill and then Florence.
Going along with that, the need right up front to identify those networks that are out there, mailing addresses, et cetera, and that kind of process, we can do that fairly quickly, because I think that is, if we can do that, then we begin to get our message out in a more effective way. And that's right there.
Okay. Florence. And then Leroy.
I would hope that your committee would submit something to the budget and funding relative to being able to support computer networks. I don't mean us inventing our own network, but taking advantage, but still you've got certain overhead costs like a phone bill, modems. And an awful lot of information gets disseminated through these networks.
Leroy and then Daryl.
I like the idea of computer networks and bulletin boards. The trouble is, they're an awful commitment of time and other resources. And the last time I talked to Jerry Rasmussen of Micron, I suggested we needed a river bulletin board, and that his office might be a good place to maintain it, and he was receptive. Now, he might need some help getting the funding for it, but we could help him do that if he's willing to do it. Jerry, if you don't know him, is a born maverick, and he's not going to let the federal government tell him he can't do something. He's just exciting to do it.
Jerry Rasmussen.
So if more of us talk to him along this line and offer our help, we might be able to get him to do something like that out of his office.
Okay. Something for the committee to think about. Daryl?
It sort of follows up, in this, we should talk about the Environmental Support Center out of DC, because they have grant programs where they grant computers, modems.
We've addressed that.
So we need to see if we can't put together a packet of groups up and down Mississippi.
Apple will give away up to 5 Macintoshes.
Well, we discussed that, and the hoops you have to jump through for that Macintosh grant through the Environmental Support Center were really tough. We were thinking about maybe playing Apple against some of the other, maybe IBM computers, and say, look, these guys are making us jump through these hoops, make it easier for us, and this is going to work, and basically come up with a plan of action to make it easier to get these without paying for them, and the support to back it up for the training, I think would be exciting.
Yeah, again, if we can avoid getting into debate and let the committee just kind of soak up what people's concerns are, go back and then figure out how to come back and address them. Daryl, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I was gonna debate about, because just Northgate Computers is in Minneapolis. We should find a computer company in the basin and
Right.
say, rather than going to Apple, which is.
Northgate?
Northgate.
That's very good.
And then the other thing, another resource is Greenwire.
Greenwire.
Which, I don't know how people see that. That's a daily thing that goes out to basically the DC bureaucrats. And also it's a place where we need to put our press releases in the Greenwire if we want to hit the Beltway folks.
It's very good. We
Okay.
get it every day.
Paul?
Just, I wasn't sure if I saw in here how we were gonna keep in touch with each other on a really easy manner. I'm finding out about things, today, anecdotally, and I'm finding out if people need information that I had, and we need a quick and easy way to make sure that we're well connected with each other, with each other's information.
And to kind of to that point, I guess one thing I'd encourage the committee to think about is the person-to-person communication in addition to the electronic and print way of communicating with each other. Maybe there's some kind of network or phone tree or something that you could talk about and think about.
There's some of that in the memo itself.
Okay,
That's not
that's
on
right.
here. And there's also a real emphasis on training, getting some training in sessions like this where people sit around and discuss how can we improve our communication skills internal, within our own organizations, within the basin, and with people who are not involved in the basin. So it's sort of a bottom-up thing, and training people at the local level more to understand how to communicate locally.
Get grants for that. Real easy.
Yeah, well, that to me is from my view, is one of the most critical things that needs to happen, because we're not communicating with each other right now, and there are probably some wonderfully easy things that we could do, but we need to think about how we can project our information to other people easily. And setting up a structure, I mean, this envisions that we're going to have some sort of staff or a focal point where information can be sent and then get back out, but also informal networks and others.
Okay, I had Florence and Mary Lee and Dwayne and Art and Bob. Wow.
This is a suggestion to the committee, and I'm not even sure how feasible it is, but again, it's something that's got to be shifted to funding. RTK Network is the network I'm hooked up for. This gives me access to the tri-databases. But the other really great thing about it is I can communicate by email with other activists, and then they have what they call activist conferences, where people from all over the country can get great information about your companies, your problems, shared information, experiences, tactics. I spend anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, or rarely more than 4 hours at a time, a night, on this network. I don't pay for it. If I had to pay for it, I couldn't afford to do it. So I don't know. I mean, I got this special service through a special program. I don't know if the Alliance could not attempt to put in its budget some type of funding to give a special 800 number perhaps, or maybe we could work through the corporation that runs this network so that our members would have this kind of access.
Okay, great.
What is
That came through a grant.
That came through a
The
grant.
grant, Environmental Support Center,
RTK.
Lee got a grant to
Okay.
empower people and get it free.
Again, I'm going to encourage people to bullet concerns, give it to the committee. If there's more detail behind it, it's not just you, Florence, it's everybody. If there's more detail behind it, talk to them.
If you could write, if you've got something about whatever it is, network, write that down, what it is and where it is, so we can put it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
yeah, but it may be a continuing process. I mean, I don't know anything about computer networks, so.
Okay. I had Mary Lee, Dwayne, Arthur, and Bob. Mary Lee.
Okay, I like the electronic media, but I think that we also ought to have action alerts, which is sort of what Paul was talking about. Maybe i.e. like 2020, have you ever seen those postcards where they give you a very concise synopsis of the problem, and then on the other side the action of what you can do? Because I think all of us are overburdened, so I think the challenge for our communication is that it's short and concise, and then what you can do. And I think I feel that the communication committee ought to look at making it a totally separate entity. It shouldn't be lost in a newsletter.
That was the first thing that I mentioned up here was newsletter, and then something in between newsletters where you can get
An action
alerts or information out about a particular issue or problem or success.
And two more bullets, is the communication via phone tree, or phone calls. Because I think if we don't do that, you won't get as good a return.
One of the things on the memo is getting a list of people who could participate in a phone tree.
Okay, just soak it up right now and then bring it back to
Fax
us.
tree rather than a phone tree, then you don't have to get a hold.
Okay, I had Dwayne, Arthur, and Bob.
Any combination of that.
Under the subject of video, I'd like the committee to consider whether there's a need for a television documentary quality video that elevates the public attitude about the river. My concern is that most people's personal exposure to the river is crossing muddy water over a big bridge in the middle of some industrial city. And because of that, their image of the river is totally unrelated to what's happening in the Blufflands, the rich ecosystems elsewhere.
The answer is yes. I mean, we do need that. We need a lot of it.
Okay, Arthur.
Either on small issues or in the river, the whole thing, yeah.
My sense is that there's a tremendous number of good ideas, and it's kind of like, I'm feeling like information overload. And the question I put out to the group or to the committee is, how do we prioritize this?
Right. So your suggestion to the committee is take a lot of these good ideas and try and pick a couple that the Alliance could start with.
Yeah.
And
Bill
put some
mentioned
priority
one set
to
of
it.
priorities, maybe that's the best, I don't know, but I mean,
Okay.
that's where you gotta work out it.
Okay. Bob? No? Anybody else? Bill?
My suggestion along those lines would be to, and I think most of them are gonna require that we do fundraising in order to get the resources in order to do that, is to pick a couple of the priorities, put together an outline for the fundraising committee, so that then we can really flesh and detail that out and go after specific funders in order to get some of these things done.
Okay. Joe?
Under that existing network of communications, you got boats, farmers, schools, libraries, etc. I think an important thing that you want to have on there is like unions. Definitely unions. On our T-shirt that we had made, if you notice, we've got the bug down here in the corner. See it?
Good for you.
That's from the union. They don't. If the union doesn't support you, you don't get to put that on your material. So that's one of the things that really important.
Okay. John?
I was just gonna ask if the other people on the committee would like to hear from the group what those priorities are, because we could go back as a committee and then sort of endlessly discuss again how we work on each of all of these things and just come back with more refined details, but not prioritize yet. So you want us to go back and just work on three or four of those top items and then work on the other things.
This is real simple to prioritize because most of what we put up here is coming up with directories of information. Directory of existing networks or existing groups that have information bases. Directory of the groups in the basin, directory of who's got a newsletter.
But you feel comfortable that that is the priority of the group? That's what I'm asking.
The priority is to get people talking to each other and to get information going back and forth. And in order to do that, folks have said we need a newsletter, we need a fact sheet or alert notice, we need a phone tree kind of set up.
We need money.
And we need to find out who's got computers so we can start hooking people together that are computer literate or that want to get on a, not everybody's going to want to be on a, what do you call that? Bulletin board. But for those who do, that, I mean, there's not a whole lot here that requires money. It's a matter of just putting it down on one sheet of paper and say, these are the things. And then for the ones that do require money, finding computers, putting on workshops to help people train, those are the things where we need to go out and find some money for those things. And that's what we'll work with the budget committee to say, these are some things that folks would like to see funded.
But that means you guys go out, that's your
That's right.
task, you do,
Yeah.
you do that.
Right. Yeah, and let me just check in. I mean, I think maybe we've taken enough time. We've kind of gone to a level of detail here, and it sounds like the sense of the group is for the committee, come back and give us your top 3 to 5 priorities.
Good.
And maybe my suggestion might be in terms of process to think about what you need to walk before you can run. I mean, what are the first pieces you need that are first steps, and then what would follow from that when we're really up and running, literally. So, is that okay with folks if we move on? Okay, let's move on to the last subcommittee, and thank you very much. Yeah.
Last but not least.
Last but not least.
Dang, I pushed these back a little bit.
Yeah.
Diane, I've got my stuff up there on the wall. Do you want me to move it here?
Yeah, why don't
Okay. So you could put that maybe on the right one.
All right.
Great. Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, this is fundraising. What we've done is we've looked a little bit at, our discussions last night were based on the mailings that went out and then sort of what we all had heard kind of from the other committees sort of via osmosis. And some of the things last night that we decided we needed to work on was in developing a 3-year plan. That was something that we reached consensus on, was to come up with something, a funding strategy for 3 years. In other words, if we were to look at a sort of a window of activity, we wanted to try to look at a 3-year plan. Then we came up with some assumptions and premises upon which to base that. And we've had the Structure and Governance Committee this morning talked a little bit about this, and certainly we're open for input. But the thing we were working on, at least as of last night, was that the Sierra Club would serve as a parent, and then we would work on spinning it off, becoming independent. And the question is the timing of that. You know, when does that actually happen? Some of that, of course, is dependent on fundraising. Some of it will be the sense of where this committee, you know, when this committee, how quickly this committee feels that we ought to move. You know, maybe we need to go back and you know, say Sierra Club, you shouldn't serve as a parent. They've been doing the work so far. You know, we may want to see whether that makes sense for them to continue those activities. I've got in the paper I'm going to be passing out to you shortly, we've got that assumption in there, but we certainly can change that if others feel that that would be more appropriate to do that. We also included in here some of the contract work for individual entities, 2 individual groups that would in fact benefit all. For those of you who are in Memphis, you'll remember the Environmental Air Force presentation that was made, and we may want to do a subcontract with them, for instance, to have available to all members of the Alliance for their use. Or it may be that, gee whiz, Diane's, you know, there's a contract with the Institute for Conservation Leadership for Diane to come and do some additional training. Or maybe wherever the network, I don't know, what happened to the last set of...
Sunday, they were yours.
Oh, here. For some of the video stuff, some of the training, anyway, that might be somebody else that we would bring in to train everybody on some computers, videos, whatever. So there may be somebody in here, some group or entity in here that will be, in essence, contracted with to benefit everybody. We've developed this timeline in which we're looking at a gradual assumption of, you know, taking on a project. Again, we may want to speed them up, we may want to slow them down. The projects may differ based on some of the discussions that some of the other committees have had. We then, obviously, we all want to verify some of the stuff with all the rest of you. And then again, on the sheets that I'm about to pass out, we will want to develop some budget numbers in here. In some papers last night, I had some preliminary budget numbers on there, but they were just, off the top of my head. And I basically took them out so that we as a committee didn't get hung up on, well, gee, that seems like it's too high or that seems like it's too low. So I've just got asked, blanks in for that. And we will then want to continue to discuss funding source categories and the amount to get from each. In other words, in our last session just now, we were talking about, go to so-and-so to perhaps get grant for computer services. Or obviously we're going to be looking to McKnight and Belden because they've both expressed interest. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we'll need to agree upon a spin-off timing, that may be reflective of the budgeting process. Let me just pass these around and and kind of walk through these and see what people think of it. I want to apologize to Bill. I forgot to add his name, so I handwrote it in here. The fact that he participated last night in our discussion. So I apologize. But just going down through these then, we had some budget and timeline assumptions, and that would be that each year we would hold a fall training meeting or some kind of a, something that would help all of us. And then we have got in here sort of a basic spring annual meeting or conference, a big holistic event. There'd be some sort of gradual increase of the staffing. Right now, apparently, the Sierra Club is spending about 2.5 days a week on the project, and the idea would be eventually over this 3-year period, you move that up to 2 persons, or it could be more, but just for the sake of something on paper, we put in 2 people. We then put in here, we phased in when different projects might begin. We've got the newsletter already, so that's already in there for each quarter. But in terms of expanding the mailing list, getting out the action alerts, the phone tree, working on some of these training meetings in the annual conference. We talked a little bit about developing mapping and other visual aids. Intern program's not something we've discussed about this morning, but it was something that has come up in previous meetings and conversations. Youth educational program, and then possibly a water quality monitoring program. Again, that was a suggestion that the committee threw out last night. Scholarship monies, we talked about that as a critical need in terms of trying to make sure that everybody that ought to be participating is able to, and that money isn't the hindering factor. I mentioned already the need to have perhaps some kinds of special work that might be underway that would benefit everybody. And then, as we've just already discussed this morning, talk about some computers or hardware, software, whether it's modems or fax machines or whatever, that will improve the communication among all of us. So based on that, then, I just did this up, and then we sort of played with it and changed it around a little bit last night, and so this paper reflects then the discussion of last evening. This summer, continuing to work on a funding proposal, meeting with McKnight, per the letter that we all received from Dan Ray. Possibly moving right on ahead with filing the incorporation papers. I heard that from governance and structure this morning. And then just the regular activities. Then we were suggesting that this fall we then start sending out the proposal to some of the foundations and others that are potential funding sources. Start to pull together some of the mailing lists and what have you, then filing the incorporation papers. Then winter, again, moving on with some of our communication ability. So hopefully we'll start to get in some of the funding at that point. Then spring of '94, perhaps that might be a time when we could start up an intern program and hold our annual conference. Then moving to year 2, which would be a year from right now, hopefully by then we will have finalized their 501c3 status, and we will continue with activities. A year from fall, that would be the fall of '94, drawing up some sort of a job description, undertaking a search process for some kind of an independent staff. We might at that point have a board of directors, governance committee, whatever it is we want to call it, or we may want to move that up in the process. Again, want to just check all this stuff out with you. And then winter of '95 was when we were suggesting that by then we hopefully will have enough funding that we will then be able to become an independent entity. We'll be able to hire some independent staff. I heard earlier the need to make sure that process is one we all agree upon. Perhaps at that point we're able to set up an independent office and then start on some of the actual projects that we've been talking about, some of the programs and stuff that we've talked about earlier today. The mapping possibly, perhaps that's when we kick in the Environmental Air Force. Is there some national policy work, whether it's Clean Water Act or other things that need to be happening that as an entity we feel that ought to be occurring. Then we suggest the spring of '95 might be when you set up the youth educational program. And then going to the last page, then just basically year 3, having these same activities underway. Then finally, potential funding sources. We will clearly need to spend a lot more time brainstorming with you all or on the committee basis of who's out there that from whom we ought to be seeking funds. At some of I think in Memphis we discussed the idea that we do want to have a small contribution for the membership groups. In other words, that we all contribute a little bit of money. I just threw in some numbers there. They're by no means set, but the idea is it's a sliding scale. And so that some, depending on how big you are or what size budget you've got, might reflect how much money you then might be able to contribute to the activity. We may want to consider some government grants. We do have an administration that is looking more favorably upon activities such as ours, thank the good Lord. And also one person who is on our committee, Jay Lewis, who was in Memphis, is not here this weekend, but did participate in our phone conversation in March, suggested that we try to undertake some local fundraising activities. So that's just a walkthrough of some of the discussions that we've had so far. What else, Diane, would you like us to?
I don't have anything else. I would ask
How about
if there are
committee members?
questions.
Is there anything
Or,
that,
yeah, go ahead.
that
Wait till I get my bulletproof vest on.
are there other committee members that met last night? Are there other things that either aren't in here, aren't clear, or that we discussed that we haven't brought up, Bill?
Yeah, the timelines here, the timelines, if you look at the timelines, they all predicate on receiving funding, so the timelines are movable.
Yeah.
That's how to make that so where it can be moved up. We just gave ourselves enough space to move them if necessary.
Other committee
And
members?
we didn't put it here, but we need to put down our suggestions as far as the personnel who will meet with McKnight, and those dates need to be up on the availability dates.
Okay.
Okay. We were thinking that definitely the funding committee should meet, as well as Gwen and myself, as far as being administrators, and that the funding committee plus other folks should. We don't want to have a mob in there, but we definitely need to have some people in there to be reflected, because my understanding after speaking with Dan Ray, this will be an opportunity to not only talk to Dan, but talk to his boss as well. He's very anxious to talk to us and talk to other people in the alliance.
Other committee members want to jump in with anything? Then let's move to questions? What's up, Bill, Paul, and Don?
I guess my question is more of process, and I guess this, what I see here was not exactly what I thought the fundraising committee was doing as far as tasks are concerned. Is the process then that, let's say the projects and programs committee, for example, develops a map, and if that's what they want to do is take on a specific project, and then that gets forwarded to the fundraising committee, who then looks at the potential funding sources and drafts a proposal, or I guess what I don't understand is, are there ways that we can identify potential funders up front and kind of work together as we come along? I don't even know if my question makes a whole lot of sense.
What I heard you say is who is actually to develop the programs? In other words, is it the program committee or is it the staff? I don't know what others feel, but maybe it's a balance of the two. In other words, that whoever the staffing is going to be working very closely with the program committee to make sure that as things evolve, that's what makes sense for the future of the Alliance. Was that what your question was?
John turned to me and said, I think I can clarify what your
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I wondered if, I think Bill was asking how, and this might not actually be the same thing, but it gets me ahead of the line.
Very clever.
I didn't hear what you
It
said.
might be how,
Trying to get in front.
I was wondering, like, in the timeline, how did you decide where to fit the programs?
It was thrown up in the air and put them in there. So somebody may say, gee, we need to have the water quality monitoring. The program committee has decided is the burning issue. That's what we have to have first. We'll move that up and move the rest of it. I mean, the idea was it was just arbitrary phase-in of activities, knowing that at some point, at some given stage, you're only going to be able to do a certain number of things. And the idea was to phase in the activities, and it's very arbitrary. So change them around, strike them out entirely, put in new ones. But the idea was just so that as we go and talk to McKnight and other funding sources, they have a sense of some of the kinds of things that we are proposing to do.
Actually, that wasn't my question.
Oh.
No.
My question is does the fundraising committee become activated only after a other committee comes to them with a project that they desire funding for?
Proactive, right?
Yeah, well,
Okay, I think we need to go back and do a genesis of where we are at this point and why the letter from Dan Ray. I thought someone would ask why the letter from Dan Ray.
I don't know. Well, go ahead if you want to.
No, I'm saying what seems to be missing here is if we go along with this, we're gonna be a year without submitting anything.
No, I think we submitted now.
No, we have submitted something, but I mean, what have we submitted? We need to say what have they asked us to submit to?
I'm not sure I understand
I mean,
what you
look,
just said.
what have they have agreed to? What do they want from us as far as? My understanding, Dan, is they want us to be able to tell them when we meet with them how best McKnight can work with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Bill is saying that what we need to put something on the table when we go, we need to have something when we sit and talk with McKnight and not let McKnight or any other foundation set where they think we need to go. They need to have something in front of them.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're here to do this weekend.
No,
Okay, let me.
try.
Committee, can I say something?
You,
Let me try to be clear. He wants to know, is it the finance committee that says, this is what's gonna get funded, based on what this committee comes up with? Or does the finance committee say, gosh, look, there's a grant out here, so program committee, you come up with something that could fit into this? Because monitoring water is our top priority, that we may or may not find money to do monitoring. That money may not show up for 3 years, or never.
So it's gonna be a floating sort of thing. It's what
You're talking about process, Bill. In
yeah.
other words, how does it work? Which comes first, the cart or the horse?
Yeah, Willie has defined it. I
Okay.
guess what I was seeing the fundraising committee doing was kind of working independently and identifying sources out there for projects, at the same time that they may be being developed in other areas. So it's like while we're trying to define what it is that we're gonna need funding for, you're already out there kind of identifying where there's pots of money, that we can attract once we do have a proposal that fits into, a funding source.
It will be a combination of things, and the committee may find, our communication committee may find a funding source. Go to the finance committee and say, look, we found this funding source, this is what we'd like to do in communications, and the source says they're really excited about it, help us put that together as the alliance package. So, it's gonna
Or the
be a
program
moving
committee
thing.
can come and say, we want this program funded, please go find us sponsors.
Yeah.
The alliance says, this is what we wanna do this year,
Yeah.
these are the 2 things we wanna do, and now your job is to go.
I mean, the thing is, the committees are not gonna be operating in isolation of each other. We're gonna hopefully continually communicate with each other, and so there won't be some 6-month lag between you coming up with something and them getting the information about what it is.
Okay.
Or vice versa.
I see I see a lot of hands,
I'm outta
actually.
here.
So, I think Arthur's been trying again. I know
Did
Mary
that
Lee
help?
wants to get in on the committee.
If I understand things correctly, and I may not, I mean, we're talking about later this afternoon making decisions about projects and communication and networking mechanisms. Okay, get the ball rolling. And that's, at that point, the skeleton will
Change
assume.
dramatically. This was just to help us figure out that over the next 3 years, we've got some activities. We have to figure out when we want to phase them in.
Right.
And as you suggested, Bill, it may be the chicken or it may be the egg. There's a wonderful funding opportunity that we've got now for computers, or we've got McKnight hot to trot, and therefore we've got to be able to present something to them. And I think we have to just kind of work it and see how it all comes out. That's my sense of it.
Let me try to frame what we're doing, because that started out as a question. It obviously wasn't a question. Okay, so let's start with the framework that we were trying before that seemed to work really well, and let's give feedback to the subcommittee. What do you like about what they've proposed so far? And then let's switch it over and say, what are your concerns that you'd like them to go back and work on and bring something back to us? Paul, what do you like?
Well, that's actually a suggestion. I think we need to get independent staff person much sooner if it's at all possible.
Okay.
I think we need to agree that all of us are in touch if we go to, one organization goes to a grant maker, that the steering committee needs to be advised of this beforehand. Neither Ann or I had heard, I realized the club's been doing a lot of stuff, but neither Ann or I had heard the proposal was going there. We're kind of surprised to hear from the foundation.
Well, if you would look at your package, that was part of an overall 2-year process.
Okay, well, I read everything, entire file on the Alliance on the way here yesterday, Bill, and just saying, just copy us on your letter to the foundation, that's all I'm asking.
Okay. Other things that you like? Let's start there.
3-year horizon.
Like the 3-year horizon? Other things?
Yeah, I like that we're committed to continuing basic fundraising activities just to keep the alliance together as for whatever length of time we can. I mean, we need that maintenance money or we're still not going anywhere. So I appreciate that the alliance is taking the initiative to go after money to build that alliance.
Okay. Other things that you like about their proposal that they brought out? Okay. Suggestions or things that you think the committee should think about as they go back and deliberate? Okay. I'm just going to work around the table. We'll start Daryl and
They need more comments on their stars. They don't have, they're not, 6 digits is not enough, folks.
More commas.
That's it.
Okay, Don?
It seems that some of the confusion may be that if you hire a staff, what are they going to be doing of these projects and this coordination? And I mean, that staff will have some set of duties, and then there are projects that may be independent from that. And maybe we need some distinction between this, which is a funding of a central office, which will have a number of duties and things that they will be doing. And then there's this idea of specific projects that may be distinct and need funding, and we may need some distinction between those kinds of things.
Okay, Willie?
There are a lot of opportunities for funding that may become available on where to either individual groups or to the committee that could fund one of the groups in the alliance, but not the alliance. You know, there might be something that would fit that local group or local project, but it would not fit into the alliance. So but that would help to build the alliance. So it's looking for those opportunities. Not to say, oh, well, that would just help a local group. We won't worry about that. And we may end up getting more funding overall that way than just looking to multiply that resource.
Okay. Others? Dwayne?
I'd like to express an opinion that I don't think the Alliance can provide any real effective leadership if we don't have at least 2 full-time equivalent as soon as possible. And that needs to be an executive director and then one or combination of people focus in on the communication needs beyond that. Seems to me we need a multi-year grant from one primary funding source that allows us to launch this organization, and then it probably needs to be at $150,000 or more in order to think that we're going to make a real difference here. And I guess the last item is that typically when we launch a major new project or activity, we try to have one major donor that provides at least half of the goal, so that when we announce it, we're halfway there to whatever the goal needed to be. And I think that we ought to set some pretty high goals for ourselves and try to find that one major donor that takes us halfway.
Okay. Others around the table? Other concerns? I think there are some over here.
I'll just say amen to what Dwayne said. Yeah. Right on target. I think we have a donor that has expressed interest and actually wanted to talk with us about this back in January.
And my comment was right along the same lines, that should be the priority, I think, in the community.
Okay.
Are we concerned about who we're getting money from?
You mean as in
Does Dow
dirty
Chemical-
money supplies?
Dow Chemical, do we go for them?
Help me remember in some of our earlier meetings, didn't we not discuss having?
This as a, yeah.
Okay.
We talk about a set of principles. I believe we talked about a set of principles that we would, as far as our funding, that we had a criteria.
John?
For instance, I don't know that Clorox project that's been around here. I have no idea, what kinds of good or bad things they might be doing with their discharges and I know a lot of people feel very uncomfortable about cores, and not to mention all the petrochemical industry. So.
Yeah, understanding that the budget isn't at all fleshed out, I just wanted to make 2 specific suggestions on the budget, that there be line items for volunteer travel and consulting. Because I don't, some of us wouldn't have been able to come to any or all of the meetings over the last couple of years were it not for that volunteer travel support.
Absolutely. I believe it's in there, but I think it's worth reiterating.
Okay. Others around?
Some of the things that, I mentioned them last night, but then there may be other groups or other people that someone might know in this group here, the Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, the certain other government grant, certain other, organizations that have funding. And when they come to the end of the year, the end of their year process, whenever that is, their annual budget, comes to the end of that, physical time period, they end up with money that's left over that they just wanna get rid of. You can sometimes go and apply for that money. Might not be a lot, but it's something that, they don't really have a lot of stuff that goes with it. You can get it pretty reasonable. So that's some of the things, if anyone knows of those type of organizations that,
I'm sorry, I didn't add that into
Yeah.
our thing, and I forgot to add that, but that was a good suggestion, so.
Larry?
Yeah, I just had a thought on defining Don's idea of thinking of the funding sources in terms of project funds and then in terms of operating funds. It might help you better define your sources and what you're doing.
that might be where, some of that leftover funds could come in for some operating funds, because they're not, usually not a lot of money, but there's money that they just have to turn back if they don't use it.
There's a lot of discussion about the projects driving the funds, but if you think about fundraising in two different senses, it might help better define what we're doing.
I'd like to talk about how we get from this point to 94, because there ain't no money. Now, yeah, I've heard some very good ideas, but the point of the matter, we have an opportunity, and I agree with you, Dwayne, you're absolutely right. The immediacy of what we need to do is now. When we sit down with Dan Ray, what are we gonna say to him? Now, a major form of right, but there are other folks who are willing to fund this as well. Not maybe in total, but in partial. This gives us an opportunity. This is not a McKnight proposal. This is a proposal that can go to a number of people.
Well, I'm assuming, Bill, on that, it is, to me, that's what we'll come up with by the end of this weekend, by the end of today, is
Right.
a sense of what ought to be in that funding proposal.
Exactly, it's just more, I just think, and I agree too, I think that we need to put a person or persons on faster than the timeline, but I understand the timeline.
2 full-time people would be smart.
Exactly.
I mean, my
I don't want
understanding
to-
is we're
right.
gonna fill this out by the end of the day, because the programs committee's gonna give
Right.
input, and another committee's gonna give
Right.
input, and then we're gonna make this exactly reflect what we think, and that's what we think.
Exactly.
Well, with some,
With a little
written,
play, yeah, but.
yeah, I mean, written explanation.
Sure.
And one of the things is that internally, when there's an opportunity for us to get funds to alliance members who have particular skills and are able to do things in a particular area, that we need to do that. We need to look at that. We need to look internally before we look externally as far as dispensing any types of revenue
So,
whatsoever.
so you're suggesting a special projects fund, something that we developed that we can then.
Well, and also even past that, when we're looking at it, if we have a project that's going to look to hire and bring on other folks, we look internally into the alliance as far as bringing those people on.
Like we might have somebody who works half-time in a member organization, somebody else who works half-time.
That's fine.
Someone's housed somewhere, someone.
That's true.
We've got to do the immediate stuff, because the day's already half over.
But what, can I?
Yes.
See, but I think I disagree a little bit. If I'm hearing what Dwayne and Paul and Steve are saying, that what we need to do is to have a specific proposal that goes for administrative, for running this alliance. I guess I see what we're going to McKnight for is for a proposal to do a conference, and that getting staff to do the work is coincidental to that. So, I mean,
I don't see that whatsoever. This is totally amazing.
I
Nothing else to say.
think it should be what you just said originally, that, I mean, the conference is part of that, but we need to get things going. We need to be able to support the operation of the alliance. And I think that the conference is definitely a part of it. I mean, maybe it just switches the focus a little.
Okay. Let me just check in. I think we did a go-round. Is there anything else that people want the Finance Fundraising Committee to go back and consider as they bring us back a report that we're gonna just get money, Joseph
We need to
said.
hire coordinators. Coordinators can help with, look at my job, I'm helping with a national convention, I'm working on the issues. I do a lot of fundraising, I do a lot of media stuff. do a lot of coordinating with other groups, we need that body, and Dwayne just hit the nail on the head, we need that body, or even better, two.
Well, why don't we go back and see what we can come up with, because
Yeah, let the
I
committee go
know, I
back.
know a little bit about this, and I think we have other people who know a little bit about this also.
Okay.
What we need is a showboard.
One thing's obvious, a proposal can't be written by a group, they need something.
Okay, so, we are at roughly, what time? Almost noon. What, let me just make sure I'm giving instructions to the subcommittee, so we get back what we need to get back, so we can make decisions this afternoon. The tasks of the subcommittees are gonna be to take what the group has given you, both what they like, so you use that kind of stuff to strengthen your proposal, your recommendations back to us, and suggestions to think about. I think we're going to be able to best make suggestions if each subcommittee can bring back very clearly stated on 1 or 2 newsprint sheets, even just an outline of what it is that you're proposing. There, and I just want to make sure everybody heard that, because if it's too complex, if it's too complicated, if we're going back and looking at memos that have been written, et cetera, it's going to be very hard for everybody to say, yeah, we want to do that and feel good about it. I don't want to, basically what I'm saying is I don't want to take time this afternoon going back over old territory or having to explain things as we have this morning, okay? So if you can bring your proposals back in very succinct, two pages on newsprint. If you need help thinking about how to put it up visually, I'm very willing to help. But it needs to be something that we can all look at and understand, ask questions about, and then make a decision about. So, yeah, Arthur.
Does that need a timeline with it? I mean,
That would be terrific if you can put, like, projects and programs, or when the communication networking goes back and tries to prioritize, if you could put it on a 1 to 3 year timeline, that would be fantastic. Because then we could put it all up and look at if it makes sense, if we're trying to do it all in the first 6 months, which usually happens, or if it really does flow over 3 years.
There we put ballpark money figures, if we've got any ideas in our committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
More stars, more commas, more stars. Okay, are all the subcommittees clear on what your task is?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's do a time check. I'm thinking in subcommittees you probably need about an hour and a half to work. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
An hour and a half?
Check that now.
Check in and at it. Okay, so I'll give you an hour to work, and I'll check in and try and get time frames, but work to get done in an hour. And if you have to have more time, because again, the work's going to get done better in a small group than it will be in the large group. So I'll just check in an hour. So if we break now, lunch is at 12:15.
12:15, it's 2 doors down on the left.
Subcommittees can work any and everywhere around, but the goal would be to try to come back here by 1:15. Let me know where your subcommittee's meeting so I can check in with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 15-minute break, have lunch at 12:15. Subcommittees will meet or convene, I would say, close to 1 o'clock, and then we'll shoot to be back.
That's a little fast.
Okay.
That's an hour.
Okay, so 1:15, thanks. And shoot to be done at 2:15, so that would mean we'd reconvene here at 2:15. Each subcommittee would have their 2 sheets, and we'll look at things from there and try to make decisions. Question?
Will we have access to this room at any period of time? for
Yeah,
meetings?
the whole, yeah. And there are lots of markers. Bill?
I just, earlier this morning, I had made an announcement that I was considering having a meeting during the lunch hour.
Okay.
To talk about ag appropriations. I think rather than get people off the track, that what I think I'm gonna do is just not do that at this point in time. I'll put a sign-up sheet back for anybody that's interested in talking about it, and we can talk, I can make arrangements to talk about it at a later date.
Okay. Yeah.
One more resource I'll put up here, I just read it there's a non-point source newsletter that I'll put up, EPA puts out. And this month they have a watershed registry form that I think we should fill out. And the problem is it doesn't quite fit us because it talks watershed greater than 10,000 miles. I think that's us. So I think because what they do, they put this on a national bulletin board for EPA folks. I think it puts us on their radar screen. And I think we need to, here it says attach 5 organizations. I think we should attach our whole mailing list of folks working on this. So I think it'll be a way to start getting them to know that we're out here organized and moving.
And I think anybody that has a watershed, you ought to get that to them. We're trying to do that with the watersheds we work with, like the Friends of, they need to fill that out. So that's part of the information we can use later.
Yeah, I brought with me a list for Gwen of all of the river groups that we're aware of that are in the National River Conservation Directory in the 33 states in the basin.
One announcement I want to make, the Institute does do other kinds of training besides meeting facilitation. One of our most successful programs has been a week-long individual leadership conference for 15 individual leaders. It's very intensive, and actually when I read the Networking and Communication Committee report, I thought, wow, this really fits in because it really focuses on communication skills, leadership skills, working with different interpersonal styles, then individuals take it back and have an impact on their organization. One of the things that we're considering is submitting a proposal to McKnight, because they're out there doing this kind of stuff, for sponsoring a week-long individual leadership conference for Alliance members. And if you're interested in that or want to give us ideas and input on that, please talk to me, because the way I see it is it's a very intensive experience, and people come away from it both with increased skills as well as increased understanding of each other and the groups. And I felt that it fit really well with what the Alliance was doing and would help strengthen over the long haul the work that the Alliance is doing. So if you have any input or ideas, talk to me during lunch or at a break or whatever. We'd like to put together some kind of informal advisory committee so that we get input from groups in the Alliance.
On that, for anybody who has known anybody who's done this, we've gotten some wonderful feedback. These folks do a fabulous job with that leadership training. I've had people, who we have suggested participate in it, call me up afterwards, and it's like they're born again.
What does it cost?
It's a new, real new lease on life.
What does it cost in what way?
How much?
For groups? Some of it depends on what size grant we get. I mean, the conference itself is a 7-day session. It's very staff intensive, and so the budget is between $20,000 and $25,000 because it's so staff intensive. We try to get as much of that as possible so that groups that want to come can pay for transportation and a very small tuition fee on top of it. It's a terrific training program. It sounds like a large price tag, but when we look at the long-term results in the groups that participate, it's just phenomenal. So
It is a given that will be included in the recommendations that come out of the
okay, great.
Communications Committee.
I just wanted to make sure it was out on the table, so we're all
It'll be
part
on
of it.
the newsprint,
Okay.
from the table to the newsprint.
Okay, great,
Thank you.
sure. So lunch a bunch, subcommittee work, back here at 2:15 if things go well in your subcommittees.
Someday,
Oh, there it is.
they don't have a standard, they have public commentary. Anybody can make it. I don't think a lot of people
I put them back over on the table.
Everybody could write in on zero.
Okay, folks, can please find a seat. We're going to hear reports, make decisions. Yeah, Arthur, we're going to make decisions.
Which part is the important part?
Who
Hearing
said
the
that?
report or making a decision?
Just do that first in the morning for all correction.
Make decisions.
Well, we're supposed to break again and then come back again.
You ready for a break already? Okay.
Already.
Your legs or your arms is where you want the break at. John.
How high up do you want it on the legs and how low do you want it on the arms?
Okay, I have 2:45, right? what I'd like to do, because I think we had a pretty full discussion and committees got a lot of input before, is to hear the committee reports. And again, what you're getting from the committees, and I hope you framed it this way in each of your committees, is a recommendation about what we should say yes to, basically. So they've set up for us their recommendation, their proposal. And given that, what I'd like to do is to, since we've already had a round of input, see if there are any major objections after each presentation. And if they're not, see if we can test consensus. And that is going to look like voting. I'm going to ask you to hold up your hand if you could go along with this. And if you can't go along with it, you hold up your hand when I say you can't go along with it, and then you tell us why. And if we're not able, if there are people in the room that aren't able to go along with what's proposed, then we'll call a caucus of a small group of people to try and come up with a second proposal. And the reason I'm suggesting this is we could get into a very long roundabout debate with the large group that I don't find near as productive as trying to understand what the problem is and give it to a small group to come up with something that we then reconsider. Okay? So it's a little bit of modified consensus, but I find that it works with a group this size especially, and hopefully won't help us to bog down. So is the process clear? And I'm going to see, going on 3, I'd like to see if we could get to 4 o'clock, take a break, come back at 4:30, so a long break, you go out for a walk, we come back at 4:30 and we spend an hour nailing down what needs to happen between here and then. You know, what are the very next steps that we need to take as a group? Okay? Does that sound okay as a kind of proposed? Okay. We've got 2 up here first. Which one wants to go first? Projects and programs?
I'll do it.
Okay. Bob?
Okay.
All right.
We didn't do much changing. We had several, Dwayne has made several great comments. We think that the project should be developed around 3 basic categories. Number 1, the coalition building for the purpose, and we had 3 pages because we ran out of time here. Coalition building for the purpose of recognition of the river as a special resource is our primary goal. And we're going to set out to do that through a number of steps. Address the needs of the river and its people. That's a long-term kind of thing that we'll begin to be working on. Annual measurement, which I read all through those, or we covered those before, to be accomplished by submission of several annual reports to make a major attempt to preserve the natural and native biological diversity. And then C, we want to impact legislation such as the Clean Water Act or state legislation. And part of that is the recognition of the river as a special resource. Then we want to develop a citizen information network of the river basin. We'll collect data, we'll develop a database, and we'll disseminate the data. And we have suggested that we can collect the information by developing a worksheet, by sending member groups this worksheet, by identifying data gaps, and by holding town meetings, or suggest that town meetings be held, all to try to collect data. Then we're going to try to develop a database using this information, and then we're going to start a dissemination project, which will try to make, we're going to have to work very closely because it all deals with computers, getting out computer information, again, getting this information out through town meetings and getting a fact sheet out on why the Mississippi River should be designated a coalition or a special place. And all of it focusing around recognizing the specialness of the Mississippi Basin to the United States and to the people of the United States. And the last thing, of course, we're talking about education, which we've basically given over to the communication, or at least we have to deal with them. We want to deal with the public, state and local leaders, Congress, and we want to increase telecommunication. It seems there's a lack of telecommunication skills among the people that we're all going to be dealing with. Of course, what we want to do is develop a river day, and we've suggested October 3rd, which is the first day of the Clean Water Day, and we're going to be working on that. We'll develop some information through press releases and prayer meetings and signature kinds of things. And then, of course, we have a catch-all 5 because we recognize that there are new projects that we will want to take into consideration. Some of them are the farming kinds of things. The zebra mussel may be coming in. There are lots of things that we'll be moving through. We're trying to start the network. We're going to have a fact sheet out. Florence is going to be working on that, and the fact sheet will be a press release sheet that will be sent out to everybody, why we need to have the Mississippi designated as that particular thing. And of course there are lots of long-range things we're trying to do, which is to get the database going and all those kinds of things, but we thought the River Day and the fact sheet and the designation of the special status for the river could give us something to focus on during the next 6 months, and we could move everything ahead based on that. And it would give also the staff that we're going to hire something to work on and us something to work on. Okay. Now.
Point of clarification, on the first page you were talking about developing worksheets. You're talking about white papers and basically factual pieces of information. What did you mean by that, Bob?
We're talking about which one?
Well, I think it was
The information.
yeah.
What we're trying to do is we're going to put together, and I hope we're going to get it done today, we're going to put together a sheet that we'll send out to you, and you will give it to everybody who lives along the Mississippi, and they will fill out this fact sheet on what their problems are by mile marker. That's the one thing we're going to try to do. So we're going to get that out immediately that we can begin to gather data. Now, how we're going to assimilate that data, we haven't figured that out yet, and we'll assume that the staff will be working on it. We're going to be trying to work on somehow trying to arrange for a database, either pigtailing, hooking on to another network that already is in existence. For instance, if we begin, I might even use my network, and then trying to figure out how to get internet hooked into this. But those of us who work with computers will try to be working that. But those data sheets start now, and we're assuming that they'll be coming in, because if somebody from down here at Valmeyer finds out about it and they've got somebody dumping hog guts into the river, they can go to the mile marker and get that in, but that might not be for 6 months or 8 months. So we want to get that going and try to figure out how we're going to get it online so people can access it.
Okay, but what about research of issues? Is that something
That's Florence's, that's our fact sheet. We're going to get one started, right, Florence, and then the rest will follow. And so if there's another research fact sheet that comes out, that will be fact sheet number 2. Fact sheet number 1 will be on why we need to designate the river as a special place so we can get it to our congressperson. In other words, we might not have a lot of information now, but it's like I said, I want to go to Paul Simon and say, Paul Simon, we're working on the river as a special place, and we thought you should be informed of our efforts. Be aware that we're going to be coming at you with some information. Then everybody else is going to be working for information. With information. We might have 10 fact sheets out this year, but that will be in the process. How do we want to do this now, Diane?
Let's just take clarifying questions. Is there anything else from other subcommittee members that you wanted to kick in? Any other input?
I have a clarifying question on, has there been any thought then given to the legislative vehicle for recognition of the river as a special precious resource?
What we've talked about, we're going to set up a special subcommittee to work on drafting legislation to be added to the Clean Water Act.
So that goes to Simon at the same time as
Right. And we're going to try to identify other folks other than Simon. We're going to try and identify congresspersons along the river that we have working relations with, so we go in with.
And we also want to deal with state legislatures, because the state of Illinois is trying to do something on the Illinois River, but they've ignored the Mississippi. So we're going to do the same kind of thing.
I just wanted to know how deep that was going beyond
Well,
the river's a special place.
we will probably take the people with expertise and begin to work with those facts. We'll do something to do that.
We're going to try with the Clean Water Act, but if we don't succeed there, we'll go on to something else. For example, the designation of the river that has already occurred is in the Water Resources Development Act of 1986. When that comes up for reauthorization, we haven't already got it done. That seems like a very good vehicle to expand it.
And we already have, a lot of people. Diane Cameron is working on this issue. She's not here, but I'm sure we can tap into her. There are a lot of people that we'll tap into to help writing these things. That's just our suggestions there for something we can do now, because we got to get moving.
That's plenty clear. I don't know.
Okay.
Other clarifying questions? Okay.
Good.
Let's see if we can. Leave it there, leave it there.
Or you
for
don't
now.
want to take, somebody else
Because
doesn't
what we
have?
need to do is make a decision on
Oh,
this.
okay.
I know this is new for this group. Not because it shouldn't
I have
be,
a concern,
because
I have
it
a
is.
concern.
You have a
about it,
concern
not a
about it.
question.
Okay.
No, I had, said my concern about navigation on.
Okay, we discussed that. Somebody want to take that on?
I'm the one that recommended, others agreed, that we cannot exclude the transportation industry from the discussion. In fact, if we go for special designation of the river and we haven't included them in the process, it will probably kill it. You know, as much as it goes against the grain on some people to include the navigation industry, I don't think we can exclude people just because they might disagree.
It's got economic includes navigation, and you have to point it, give it more special attention.
Economic in the sense that it's a transportation medium and makes money. Environmental in the sense that it caused a lot of environmental destruction. It belongs in two places.
And it's also recreational.
Yeah, recreational connection.
We just felt that leaving it in there was the lesser of the two evils than taking it out, because we feel that we're gonna have to deal with that as a group, both good and bad. And so left it in there because we didn't want to omit it. It was either one or the other, omit it. We felt the lesser of the two evils was to keep it in.
Just a point of clarification, at the last meeting, in developing our strategies and purpose statement, we had about 12 issues. Is it fair to assume that any issue that showed up there is still an issue?
Yes.
But that it's more of an issue for informal networking as opposed to an issue that we will organize around in the first year?
Yeah.
Do you wanna run through those very quickly, just to see if there's any that the group wants to,
If we actually
Yeah,
listen,
or are they all
Oh,
there?
I don't know.
I think
You think they're?
the concepts are pretty much inclusive. I think. Maybe we've left out something. We want to go through it and look and see if we left something.
That's what we did last night.
I thought we did,
We went through
okay,
all-
we still may have left out something.
We might have, not us.
You know not what else.
Support your
So,
committee. Keep
so
it
just to
going.
reiterate what Dwayne said, make sure everybody's clear, the idea is that this is the focus for the first 6 months, at least, probably a little longer than that. But that the work that you've done so far to create a mission statement and the broad concepts that are there, and the work that you've done to identify what are the goals and the issue areas underneath it, still stand. And that, in fact, is what this is based on.
The comment that you made, Wayne, we have such spirited discussions over there, so sometimes every single point doesn't come up. But the point that you made about case studies, that could be part of the fact sheets. And I assure you that some of it will.
Okay.
Are you gonna deal with factors
What?
the sheet factors, like say for instance, X number of, X pounds of, atrazine comes down in Mississippi, comes down the Missouri
If
River.
that is the kind of information I receive, that will
Okay.
be, and yes.
Okay.
In other
We want a
words,
one-page
things that the Alliance
fact sheet.
feels, no, I'm not even limited to one page, a one-page summary fact sheet, and then a supporting pages. But anything that members of the Alliance feel should be included, they should get that information to us, so that we can include it.
And I can just, the Clean Water Network is already working. They've done briefing papers and things like that. We're gonna basically try and be similar to them on a briefing paper on why the Mississippi River should have a special designation. So, that's why we picked the 3rd of October to tie in with their activities, so.
If anybody wants to help with that, we
What?
just need your fax numbers. And that's one of the other things that we ought to try to do, is get everybody's fax number so we can get this stuff to you quickly.
Okay.
And I'll start this around.
Let me just, are there other concerns or questions before we can make a decision on this? Because we are getting into level of detail that, frankly, I'd say you could go and talk to Florence if you're concerned about that piece, or other members of the committee if you're concerned about small
This is
business.
a ways of decision making, I can tell.
Jim?
Well, back to navigational, it's just like, I see navigation industry as the bad guys. So are the polluters. We don't have polluters on there. Why do we have navigation but not
Let me
polluters?
clarify. We didn't say navigation industry, but you cannot deny that the Mississippi River is, and probably has been ever since man has been on this continent, a vehicle for navigation. We're not necessarily talking about industry navigation.
The difference between the sewage end of it is there are laws that are starting to push down on it. There aren't on navigation.
I suggest we try to get around this.
We're gonna navigate
That
around
was
this.
a fun.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think we need to move on.
Okay, let me try and not avoid decision making, but just to test consensus. How many of you can support?
We want to still address his navigation thing, I think. but-
Right.
Oh, you're doing that.
Well,
Let her finish.
yeah, I mean, I think this is a point that could be argued till the cows come home. And I think that it's a point that has been raised, the committee has considered it, and they've come back with a proposal. And what I'd like to do now is to consider the proposal that they have and see if we can support it or not, as a group, okay?
Their proposal being to leave it in.
Yeah, their proposal is to leave it in, and their proposal is everything else that's here that they think
Can we?
the Alliance should be about on programs. Yeah,
Can we vote twice then? First to see how the whole alliance feels about that word navigation, leaving it in, and then the second to accept the whole thing.
okay, we can do that. Okay, let's just test consensus about how many feel we should leave navigational in? This is just a test. How many feel it should be excluded? Okay,
What surprise, surprise.
so it sounds like in terms of working on that, there needs to be more conversation with Jim and other people on the committee. Then the rest of the proposals that are here, it's a very helpful suggestion for us. Can you support what the committee's proposed that the Alliance focus on? If you can, just straw poll, okay? And if you can, okay.
And I think what happens is if we come up with a navigational thing that your group of people doesn't want to agree with, you don't sign on to that. And there's going to be some things that you're going to propose that some of us are not going to sign on.
I think what Jim's saying is it's not clear from that, we're gonna work on navigation.
It's not clear we're going to work on recreation either. I think we're going to try to say that this, the river is
What we're
this.
saying is that the river is a special resource.
For navigation, for,
Recreation.
we're not going to work on it according to this state.
See, with respect to navigation, the Water Resources Development Act already says that that is one of the dedications of the Mississippi River. We have to change, we don't have to agree with it, but we have to change the law. Here's
Leroy, no one's proposing eliminating navigation in Mississippi. We're just saying whether or not it's an issue.
Just go ahead and store that waste. Let the nuke waste into the water. We'll get rid of the zero emissions.
Our single is a $5 billion navigation expansion.
Those are questions we have to deal with, whether we like it or not.
I'm saying let some of that radioactive waste
Let me
go.
just check again.
Okay, let's go on.
Plug everything up.
I think all we're doing here is we're saying we're approving that this is the work plan for this, 6 months. I don't think we're talking about the semantics.
So the next time we meet.
We're talking about a work plan.
And I just want to say, this is an outline that you're going to work on. You need to keep talking with each other about the details and things that get produced under the Alliance's banner head. You're all going to have a chance to look at and give comment to and have input on, I think. Right? Okay.
Why don't you take one question? If this is for the next 6 months, does that mean the programs and projects subcommittee is gonna get together 6 months from now and then do the next 6 months? Or do we just say, this is how we're gonna start, and we're gonna see when we need to think about the next set, or?
Actually, we're talking more than 6 months.
It just seems like an awful lot more than 6 months.
It is, but there's certain time frames we had to do. We've
Sure.
got, the immediate thing, let's get the information in so we can come up with a fact sheet that we have to go and talk to people about the special designation.
So if I was,
That's October 3rd. In the meantime, we will continue to gather information, develop the database, that might last for years.
this is just the initial start of
Also,
projects and programs for the
the
Alliance.
talking part of it, until that until we get the designation we want.
We've got one thing in there that's a 5% per annum increase, that's a 20-year lifespan, so they
So this is
they
just
don't all end
initiation of
tomorrow.
the project.
John?
Yeah, I think what's being raised here is also a question, a process question about the content and message that goes out in whatever comes from the programs and projects as they go along. And, I was wondering if the program committee or the structure committee or who sort of decides, the process we follow for groups to edit, sign on, disagree, comment, all that stuff. Is that something that we're missing if we don't do here today, or?
Let me just ask, is it part of the way the structure governance committee has put forward? Yeah.
I think it probably would, but
Okay.
I didn't anticipate doing it today, although I think John does make a valid point that we should really clarify that very quickly.
Instead of belaboring this one that we put forward, should we look at all the other three and
Right.
see if we got a common problem?
How they fit in with one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. Let me just ask y'all to take a deep breath, 'cause we made a decision, okay, it's all right. And we do need to see how all the pieces fit together and kind of at the end, make sure that they all do fit together and make an adjustment. But I think you should be congratulated in terms of moving this far. I mean, think about where we were a year ago and now being able to say, yeah, we believe that this is what we should focus on. And everybody in the group having input, feeling good about it in general. Okay, so let's move on. Maybe structure, if y'all could go next, kind of give us a framework to work in.
I'll do the reporting.
Okay.
Since our first report was 7 pages of narrative, and most people haven't had time to read it, we'll do a brief overview of how we're going to operate or propose to operate in the interim, and how an incorporated nonprofit would operate in the future. So the starting point is we are a organization of organizations. Our members are predominantly organizations that want to come together in the Alliance under the purpose statement that we developed at the last meeting, under the strategies statement we developed at the last meeting. There would be an annual meeting, and that annual meeting would be for 3 purposes. First, to elect a coordinating committee or board of directors. Secondly, to identify the issues and a work plan, which will be the guidance for 1 or more years, which is essentially what you did here for this interim period anyway. And then the third is to come together and celebrate and reinforce to one another so we can continue to go about our work. Not only would a 15-member coordinating committee, which would be representative of the basin and the diversity of groups within the organization, there would also be 5 of these members elected as, 4 of them as officers and 1 ad hoc elected to an executive committee that would handle sort of month-to-month details. And then there would also be a nominations committee of 1 from each of the 3 river segments or regions and 2 at-large that would make the recommendations for candidates for the next annual meeting. Working committees underneath the coordinating committee would include a fundraising, fund-seeking is the term that was used, with 7 members. And the membership here goes beyond this membership up here. That's where everyone else joins into helping on the work. There's a communications committee designated to have 8, an annual meeting committee of 9, a number of issues committees. For example, we may have 3 issues committees based off that work plan, or we may have more. A minimum of 5 on each of the issues committees. And any regional activity would occur as ad hoc regional committees appointed by the coordinating committee. We do not have any formal regional structure that exists on a continuing basis. So that if there's something that is predominantly a regional issue, it would be the coordinating committee that would appoint an ad hoc committee to take that on and define how long that committee would be working. That's the proposed structures. Any questions at this point? And the description that you have in that memo is basically the basis for writing up the bylaws. Okay.
Where's the staff on
Oh, good point.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. And who's reporting?
Presumably the staff is a dash line in right about here, I suppose.
Reports to the
Under
coordinating
executive,
committee.
coordinator of the executive committee.
One or the other. But it's between those two.
I don't think we discussed it specifically, but I would say probably since the executive committee is intolerant for month to month.
Right.
Administration, that is probably where the supervision was occurring.
So the staff out here.
Normally they're above the that way.
Yeah, that's right, there used to be a left, not right, so.
Okay. Now, having heard your issues of just do it, just get on with it. Here's the things that need to be done as soon as possible, but there has to be a certain progression. First of all, we need a fiscal agent, or I think the term we used in the memo was nurturing partner or something like sheltering partner. At any rate, we need an organization so we can start immediately, start applying for funds, and any management assistance we can get from this organization while we get started will just move us that much faster. So we're proposing a 2-year agreement be developed as soon as possible. And basically what we discussed is any organization that is possibly, maybe, kind of, sort of considering being a fiscal agent, identify yourself now. We know Sierra Club will consider it. We will take any offers from anyone that wants to be included in that discussion. If there isn't any more, we would move forward from this date, assuming that we should develop an agreement with Sierra Club. If some other organization wants to be considered, the structure committee is willing to continue to meet and compare proposals and deals and costs and make a recommendation back on who that fiscal agent should be. Does anyone else want to be considered, have their organization considered?
You don't have to, it's not a commitment, it's just if you think, well, hold the door open for 10 or 15 days, you can go back to your organization and lay it out, but just if you even think, that's all we're asking for, just to hold the spot open.
Absent any feedback within the next week or two.
Yeah, a week or 10 days, we can get back with your people. Is that clear?
Okay, do we want to leave it that open-ended, or we want to close the discussion today? Make yourself known now, or?
Just, is there any question or any reason why our close identification with the Sierra Club would be a liability to the overall? Is there some reason why that relationship would, in some groups, cause?
Well, let me suggest a little bit of the discussion that went behind this. We're in sort of a catch-22 as a new organization. We have no identity, we have no track record. As a board, we're in many cases employees or volunteers of other organizations who have our first loyalty. So without a fiscal agent that gives us some identity and some management credibility, we're already about 3 steps back. So recognizing all those things against us in front of funders, it sort of offsets any negatives that may come with any organization we tie to.
We just
Now,
wanted to be
beyond
open.
that, I don't want to cut off anyone else's discussions or opinions on that subject, but that's why we're suggesting we need a fiscal agent.
Have there been any other organizations who've come forward and offered to serve in this capacity?
No.
Have we asked?
No, this is the first time we've asked.
Well, this is a little
But it's-
awkward. I mean, I'm feeling a little awkward about it, but my sense is that if anybody else were interested in it, it would have bubbled up by now. I would think we would have heard about it, even if, and no offense to Gwen and to Bill, or anybody else from Sierra that's been involved with this, but if somebody had been unhappy with that arrangement, I would think we would have heard something. And I haven't, and maybe others have, or maybe there are discussions that I'm just not privy to.
No, we're just throwing this out here just to get this discussion going now. I mean, we didn't want to make assumptions for the group.
But I
We're looking for problems we don't exist, let's.
All right, cool.
Okay, so it sounds like I'm hearing everybody feels pretty comfortable with the way it's been going so far, and why mess up something that seems to be working so far?
Okay. In that case, we will work immediately on developing a fiscal agent agreement according to
the conditions that are in this memo in front of you.
And bear in mind, you have no competition.
Never have for the beginning.
However, we
Never
feel their
have
price is
any
exorbitant, we'll be
competition.
back to you. Confirmation of an interim coordinating committee. Now, presumably, we've got an interim coordinating committee, but it may be as high as 24 people. Before we set up a nonprofit corporation and file those, we need to know for sure who around this table is willing to take on responsibilities in this organization. So I think we need to have a confirmation as soon as possible from those that will serve on an interim committee. Once that's done, I think there should be a conference call to elect an interim executive committee of officers, and those officers will sign the articles of incorporation. And also then that conference call should probably approve the fiscal agent agreement and approve any grant applications that are ready to be submitted. Once that conference meeting is over, file the articles of incorporation as soon as possible. We're suggesting Missouri, not that that means a commitment to opening an office or having any special activities here, but frankly we just need one place, and it's a nice mid-range kind of state, middle of the river, middle of the basin, and many people have suggested that if we all open an office at some time, more than better than 50-50 chance or something, that this would be a logical place to put it. I don't know. But there is no commitment on where the office is and staff is located, just based on where the articles of incorporation are filed. Does anyone have objections to picking Missouri over any other state for filing?
Just a point of clarification, have we got an entity in Missouri that will use their name and, use their address, or whether, that might require setting up a post office box or mailing address or something? We need to do that, I'm not.
Arthur?
Either the Sierra Club Bureau or the Center of Practice Citizenship
Fine.
like that.
Okay, so that's not a problem.
Just a registered agent.
Right.
I think everybody do that.
If the attorney in preparing the articles of incorporation finds there's some obstacle like that, we'll just come back into the steering committee and start over.
Let me ask a question
Okay.
here. What are the costs? Does anyone know what the costs are from state to state for setting up a corporation?
Arthur?
Huh?
There may be some differences, I suppose.
We're
Yes.
filing federal anyway,
Yeah.
and there may be a state tax, which is.
Recording
So
fee.
the state fee is, in Missouri is nominal, I think, I'm sure it's
It
less than
seems to
100, I
me
think
that
it's like 2 or
since
3.
we're so much in the dark about
It's not that
which
much.
might be the appropriate state, somebody actually needs to answer a few basic questions about setting up nonprofits in each of the states maybe, and I think we actually ought to do a little homework on that one.
Have we a lawyer in the room?
One of the,
Not yet.
Almost.
Bill can handle it. Now it's gonna be. Let Bill go talk, Bill. we're rolling here. We're done.
I think our group also had a little bit of concern about going ahead with Missouri, but we figured that let's very arbitrarily go ahead and go with Missouri. Number one, you're not going to find any substantive differences in the way nonprofits are governed anywhere up and down the Mississippi as far as state law is concerned. So the advantages are purely where we want to locate as far as convenience for the alliance. One of the backup positions that I suggested is one of the things that you can do if you want to take a first step but want further, a little bit of further time to think about it, is you can register a name or reserve a name with the Secretary of State for each state, which essentially puts you in a place where you've got your foot in the door, you've got a name reserved, and then you can take a little bit closer look about whether or not you want to incorporate there. I guess our feeling inside our committee was that let's just go ahead and do it. The consensus of the group is they want to put these structure issues behind and move on to more substantive work.
And you could do Illinois and go right across the river in Granite City and get a cheap place to work out of, and you could incorporate in Illinois, and Illinois does not imply Chicago, because Illinois is only, and it would be close, you could get closer to the river if you went to Illinois, so either Illinois and Missouri would still put you in the metropolitan St. Louis area.
I'm just wondering about the sort of the